Welcome to the Terrible Podcast with your hosts from SteelersDepot.com, where you can find all your latest and greatest Steelers news. It's Dave Bryan and Alex Kozora, always lit, talking Steelers.
And now, here's Dave and Alex.
Welcome to the Terrible Podcast, Season 15, Episode 148. He's Dave Bryan. I'm Alex Kozora, SteelersDepot.com. Thanks for being back with us this Monday, Steelers Nation. Quiet weekend in Steelers world. The U.S. Open at Oakmont wrapping up on Sunday. Great finish to that one. Don't want to make this Golf Depot. I know it's probably so trite and cliche for two guys on a football podcast to talk about golf after the weekend, but Dave, not a big golf guy in general, but had a lot of fun watching the Open, and it was a great weekend. It was a crazy weekend, and congrats to the winner, JJ Spawn, for just really battling hard and winning it all at the end.
Yeah, that was an interesting kind of watch on Saturday and Sunday there, particularly with the rain delay and all like that, and the setup of that course. And we don't want to talk this into. Neither one of us have been on a course for I know I haven't for a long, long time there, but I do like watching the major championships and all like that. And there was a point on Sunday there where it was like, man, this is tough to watch because the course is set up so tough, and you got the weather impacting it, and you got people falling up the leaderboard and people falling down the leaderboard. At one point, I think you had 5 or 6 guys at +1, and kind of wondered if anybody would even finish it, either even or under par. And then it was one of those. It was so tough to watch that you had to watch it. Type situations there. Then you get to 17 and 18, and he pulled out that big putt. I gotta be 100% here. I thought he needed to lag that first one and then tap in for par to prevent a playoff. I didn't think he was going to do it. The way the course was playing and the pressure and all like that, I thought, okay, he tried to lag that putt and probably missed the follow-up, and then we'd roll into Monday with a playoff or something like that. But props to him. He made kind of, I think that someone said it was the longest putt that was made of the weekend.
It was. The 64-foot putt.
Yeah, and for it to come in that situation, and with that pressure and to win a major, I thought that was spectacular. So I'm glad I tuned in there, and that's about as much golf analysis I think as you're going to get out of me on this Monday morning.
It was in Pittsburgh, so we can get away talking about it. There's some sort of Pittsburgh connection we can justify, but let's dive on into the Steelers here, Dave. And as I said, top of the show, not much going on. We do have a live stream tonight, you and I, 7 p.m. Eastern time. Just type in my name on YouTube and hang out with Dave and I as we answer your Steelers questions coming out of minicamp last week in this 6-week break until training camp just about 5 weeks really from now. So, Dave, let's kind of just figure out some things to discuss because there is no hard news to talk about. The offseason is generally in the books for Pittsburgh. We know they could make another addition, an offensive weapon of some sort, be it receiver or tight end. Good chance somebody gets added at some point before week 1. A lot of qualifiers there, but some move will likely be on the horizon. But we still have a good idea of what this roster will look like in 2025 compared to 2024. So I want to ask you, maybe we can run down through it position group by position group, not in evaluating the group on its face, but is the group better or worse or about the same as last year? So quarterback, I'll start with you, Dave. It's another brand new room compared to a season ago, although Mason Rudolph, who the team knows well, returns. So it's Aaron Rodgers, Mason Rudolph, Will Howard, the rookie, and Skylar Thompson. It's going to be the question and the most examined position group, obviously, but is this room better than a year ago?
Yeah, that's a great question there. And to see this room fully overhauled once again, at the core and at first blush here, my first thought on that is the room is better. You get Aaron Rodgers, whatever he's got left in the tank, and you look back just even to last season and some of the things that he did versus what the Steelers quarterback room did last season with Russell Wilson and Justin Fields. And even though I kind of thought that the way that this team could and should go would have been the Russell Wilson route, it doesn't seem like he was probably the last the last kind of option in their mind, if you will, when it comes to that. And but I think overall, the knowledge that and experience that Aaron Rodgers gives you, yeah, I think it just makes the room better. Then obviously you add a guy that's got a lot of experience in Mason Rudolph to be the backup, and you're kind of hopeful of what Will Howard will learn in his first season. I just I can't help but think that I don't think it's astronomically better, but my gut feeling is it's better.
I do really wrestle with the question, and obviously, so much of this question is just simply about your starter. And I think you could sit there and easily say that Aaron Rodgers is a better quarterback from the pocket than Russell Wilson, even looking at Wilson last year before we knew what that year would be like, or half a year would be like in Pittsburgh. But is there something to be said about the depth, too? Because last year you had Russ and Fields, two starting caliber quarterbacks. This year, I think Mason Rudolph's a really good backup, an ideal number two, maybe the best number two in football, but he's not the starter that, say Justin Fields would be over a 17-game season, and the run element that Fields gave you, even though that really went away after Fields was replaced midseason, in part because Fields got hurt late in the year, but he did give you that wrinkle, and that was something that the Steelers quarterback room hasn't really had since the days of Cordell Stewart. And so is the depth and the variety of that from last year, does that give that group an edge over this year where it's going to be Rodgers from the pocket all the time?
I mean, you definitely don't have the mobility aspect and the threat, but I mean, we never got to see what we thought that we wanted to see out of Justin Fields last year when it came to the mobility aspect, and how much would they have been able to build on that in the second season, specifically if he would have come out and been the starter. We didn't get to see it nearly enough in the time that he started in those first several games last season while Russell Wilson was sidelined. I think the onus, I think once they got past the fact that they weren't going to bring back either Wilson or Fields this past season or this off season, and then obviously initially went to a guy like Mason Rudolph before ultimately getting Will Howard in the draft, and then obviously signing Aaron Rodgers is they they want to look at this as you got some pocket quarterbacks to work with this time. So it is a little bit of a twist moving on from what we thought that this team was going. And look, even though Russell Wilson was the age that he was once he got healthy, he never was expected to be the elite mobile kind of guy, but you could roll him out a little bit, do some of those things. But I think just overall, my thought is this was a more concerted effort to have quarterbacks on your roster that essentially do a lot of the same things with the pocket passer aspect with Aaron Rodgers and Mason Rudolph, and even really if you want to look at, I know Will Howard's got some impressive runs on his tape in college and all like that, but I mean, for lack of a better word, he's a true pocket passer.
And that was one of Art Rooney's stated goals during his tour shortly after the season ended. I know at one point he made the comment of we want quarterbacks with a similar skill set atop the depth chart, because last year you had Russ and Fields, and there was a difference there with rotating quarterbacks when Wilson kept tweaking that calf and Pittsburgh had to really adjust. And now this time you do have very similar skill sets in Rodgers and Rudolph, Howard, in an overall sense. As you talked about, there are some differences clearly, but they're all pocket passers. That's where they're primarily going to work from. Can Arthur Smith make Aaron Rodgers better? I think Smith has done a good job historically improving quarterbacks. Not every single quarterback he's worked with. Atlanta got pretty bumpy, but Ryan Tannehill in Tennessee, he became comeback player of the year. I thought Justin Fields got better in Pittsburgh than he was in Chicago, when his contract and situation reflects that. A year ago, no one viewed him as a starter, including Pittsburgh. Now he gets a solid starting level deal in New York. Can Arthur Smith make Rodgers better, or is it more about just Rodgers playing his game and being an extra year out from that Achilles tear?
I mean, I don't necessarily think there's going to be a lot on Arthur Smith's end and coaching and all like that. Or really schematically, that's going to make Aaron Rodgers seismically a better quarterback. I think the key to Aaron Rodgers having success in 2025 with the Steelers stems first and foremost from can this offense as a whole be able to run the football? And it's something we've talked about a lot of times. You've got the draft capital that you spent up front on this offensive line over the last couple of years, and you've got a full idea at this point of the offseason of who's going to be playing what and on what side. You've got, I think you've gone out. You've got, even though you don't have Najee Harris in this backfield, it feels like you've got at least a tandem that can kind of yin and yang it for you. In Jaylen Warren and Caleb Johnson. The wide receiver room, you're back almost to the same spot that you were last year, where you've got a number one and you're wondering who's going to step up other than that. So it's not like they've taken great strides on that. I would like to think and hope that the tight end room come week one will be a little better than it was overall last season. We'll see how that plays out there. But I think Aaron Rodgers' success in this offense with Arthur Smith revolves around A, can they run the football? And B, can Rodgers stay healthy? Something he's technically been able to do outside of really the Achilles season, right? But I mean, you can't let that guy get hit the way he was hit, especially last season with the Jets there. So can he stay healthy? And, from there, can he just be protected by the running game and be given the autonomy that he needs in certain situations late in games to potentially pull out, to snatch victory from the jaws of defeat instead of the other way around.
And be protected by this young offensive line with plenty to prove. I agree that Smith is not going.
Look at the core here. I mean, I don't see how so many people are saying I'm not going to watch this, because I think it is very intriguing to have a quarterback with his experience. And as bad as the Jets were last year, he still, played reasonably well statistically. Obviously, passing stats don't equate to wins all the time there. And then to couple him with a guy in Arthur Smith, who's got a lot to prove, in his second season as offensive coordinator. And although if you look top to bottom, not a lot's changed on the offensive side of football other than Aaron Rodgers and swapping out receivers DK Metcalf and Pickens. I'm very intrigued and excited to see how this plays out.
Are you getting a lot of that sentiment of fans on Twitter, social media, in your comments saying I'm not going to watch? And where do you think that sentiment comes from?
I just think it's just aggravation overall. I mean, I can't see how anybody. I think a lot of people just talk a big game, this time of year, and then push come to shove, and your favorite team's on TV.
They're going to watch. But are they saying why? Is it because they dislike Aaron Rodgers? They dislike this team, feeling like it's not going anywhere? Or are they giving a reason, saying why they at least publicly plan to turn the TV off?
I think it's mostly related to whether or not they wanted Rodgers or not.
Okay. Going back to Arthur
because
Smith.
Because he's polarizing,
Sure. Yeah, for all the stuff that comes with Aaron Rodgers. Going back to Arthur Smith, I agree he's not going to make a seismic change. I wonder I mean, I'm sure Aaron Rodgers has really, really clean mechanics overall, but as you get older, can there be things to really hone in on even more as the physical talent begins to decay, which I think you've seen with Aaron Rodgers? I think back to Ben in his final couple of years, especially those last two off the elbow injury, and really when his knees became really, really just, they turned to dust basically. And he talked about really having to kind of focus on his technique for the first time of his career. We just couldn't grip it and rip it the way that he could. Now, Ben and Rodgers are different style of quarterbacks. Ben was never the technician, and Rodgers is certainly a lot closer to being the Peyton Manning type of being precise and really strong mechanically. But I wonder if things, can be worked on and honed in on there and done by Arthur Smith and really quarterbacks coach Tom Arth as well. So if the goal for Smith, and I assume Arth isn't to really make Rodgers better, what is the goal? If you're Arthur Smith, if you're Tom Arth, the quarterback's coach, what is your mission to making this work with Aaron Rodgers? What should your approach be?
Just do what he does well and rely a little bit on the experience and the things that he has seen over the years. And then on top of it, knowing that you do have a older quarterback in what quite easily could be the final season of his NFL career. I think one of the words you used a little while ago is protect. You've got to protect a guy like that overall during the rigors of a 17 game season there. And the best way you protect the quarterback is be able to run the football. And some of the things, I mean, look, Aaron Rodgers at his core isn't going to change what Aaron Rodgers likes to do and thinks he's done well overall. And I think it's paramount that Aaron Rodgers and Arthur Smith get on the same page in these next several weeks, even leading up to training camp, of making sure each of them know what each are trying to accomplish and what each are trying, and Aaron Rodgers specifically, of what he likes. Because here's the other thing along with it is, uh, even though Aaron Rodgers missed a good chunk of his first season in New York, at least it gave him an opportunity to kind of get a sense of the personnel that he was dealing with
Mm-hmm.
overall, and then going into his second season. And even so, I think a lot of the issues that the Jets had, and I think I talked about this in the last show, one of the articles that Aaron Schatz had recently wrote, that there were a lot of instances where it did not seem like Aaron Rodgers was on the same page with his receivers, especially up until the point where Devontae Adams was acquired and all like that. Well, I got news for you. Devontae Adams isn't coming, or doesn't look like he's coming this year. Unless I mean, he's obviously
Yeah, he signed that deal with the Rams. Yeah,
yeah. I mean,
he's staying there.
yeah, he's not going to get traded, midway through the season. And even if you go out and get a guy like Alan Lazard here over the next couple of weeks, how much does that? I mean, it gives you a guy that obviously you have history with. But even if Alan Lazard comes to Pittsburgh and you got DK Metcalf as your number one, and you're going to be running a lot of, you think that you're going to be running predominantly a lot of 2 and 3, big personnel type groupings and all like that. How many opportunities are you actually going to be able to get a guy like Alan Lazard on the field? So, my big picture thing is how much in tune can Aaron Rodgers get with his eligibles and all like that in a short period of time. One of the pluses that at least we've talked about Tom Brady switching and going to Tampa Bay and all like that. Tom Brady's a little bit more at least seemed like he was a lot more precise, my way, highway type of aspect. But even then, I bet Tom Brady will tell you, we still had some things to iron out overall. So I think one of the biggest challenges is Aaron Rodgers coming to a team and then first season with people that he's never played with before, trying to get on the same page as quickly as possible, where you don't have a lot of the errors that they had last year with the Jets. And I mean, that stems from everything from the offensive line learning this cadence and getting used to some of the checks. And look, you cannot come out and shoot cold when it comes to this schedule this year either. So growing pains in the first 6-7 weeks of the season, first 6 or 7 games could put this team in too big of a hole that you are looking at 9-8 overall, and just hoping to get into the playoffs, or 10-7 and hoping to get in as a wild card and that kind of. So I think my biggest concern about Arthur Smith and Aaron Rodgers at this point is just the rest of the personnel, and how quickly everybody can get on the same page together, especially when you talk about a quarterback that's missed, the 6 OTA practices, and even though he was there for the 3 mandatory minicamp practices, it goes without saying that he pretty much just went through individuals.
Right, right. And as last year showed, simply giving Aaron Rodgers his guys does not equate and automatically mean success. He had Nathaniel Hackett as his OC. They had Alan Lazard. They traded for Devontae Adams. None of that really improved the circumstances of the team. And that's how you get a 5-win season in New York last year. This will be a tougher question, I think, for you to answer, Dave, but I want you to give it a shot. Knowing what you know about Arthur Smith right now, the good, the bad, the ugly, how much of an ego do you think Arthur Smith has as an offensive coordinator, as a coach?
I definitely think at this point he knows that he's got a lot to prove to ever get a chance to either break the look. I mean, we've seen how many times again guys go from OCs, or climb up the ladder, go to OCs to head coaches for that one stint, and then that doesn't work out. They go backwards to OC, and then 3 years later they're out of the league. You know,
Mm-hmm.
so I think he knows that he's got a lot to prove this year, and we'll see if it goes beyond this year or not. But I mean, I do think though too that he's a guy that I know what has worked in the past, going back to my time in Tennessee, and I do kind of wonder if he's going to how much he's going to try to live in yesteryear's success
That's interesting.
because of the time and what he did in Tennessee with a big backline in Derrick Henry, and had a couple of up and kind of coming wide receivers, at the time in Tennessee, and obviously prolonged or elongated and got the best out of a Ryan Tannehill at the time there. But Derrick Henry obviously is a unique back, and as we AJ Brown became AJ Brown, and I don't think he's a huge ego driven guy to hear him talk, and but I do kind of wonder of how much he'll be able to adapt outside of what he did, what that offense did well in Tennessee several years ago.
I think he did adapt last year. I think there's an ego with Arthur Smith that isn't necessarily a bad thing. I think a lot of the top coaches and top players and top people at their profession should have some level of ego. It's just a question of how well that meshes and matches with Aaron Rodgers, who I think, has an ego. And again, great quarterbacks typically have egos, and they often need to have some level of ego. It can't be arrogance. There's got to be a line, obviously. I think.
Let me ask you this:
Sure.
How innovative have you deemed Arthur Smith to be throughout his coaching career of calling plays in the NFL?
It's a good question. When you say innovative, do you mean in terms of being creative, in terms of doing things the NFL hasn't done a lot of, or adapting to the situation and playing the hand that he's dealt in a singular season with the team he's coaching?
Really both. If I was to say, who are your top 5-10 innovative offensive minded coaches in the NFL, would Arthur Smith even come to the forefront at that point right now?
Probably not, though I don't have a list of that handy, so I don't know exactly where I would rank somebody like an Arthur Smith. I think he has been often light on his feet to adjust to what he's been dealt with, different quarterback styles and different situations. Last year, the quarterback roulette. You go back to his first year in Atlanta with Matt Ryan, which will be, I need to really watch that 2021 season in Atlanta because you had an older Matt Ryan, an established franchise quarterback, not the Hall of Famer, not the four-time MVP that Rodgers is, but that similar guy, pocket passer. I want to see how that season worked. I know it didn't work great. They went 7-10. They went 7-10 every season under Arthur Smith, but I want to go back and really dial in that year to maybe get some more information. But I think he has a structure and then he's able to adapt within it. He likes to obviously run the crap out of the football, marries outside zone and play action game, distribute the ball to all his eligibles. That's generally kind of hit the way he's worked every single season. Maybe a little less so in Tennessee because you had some true stars and he kind of leaned on those guys earlier in his coaching career. But I think he has an overall structure and is able to adapt the details from within.
Kind of interesting. Go back to what was that, the 2021 season with Matt Ryan, sacked 40 times that season.
And Aaron Rodgers sacked 40 times last season.
Right. And although Ryan only threw 12 interceptions that year, which isn't per se, I mean, it's right there in that. It's not awful, but it's not great. But he only threw 20 touchdowns that season, sacked 40 times, and you go back to that almighty stat that I love of the adjusted net yards per passing attempt number 5.92, and that was one of the worst, in several seasons for him when it came to that numbers. And, obviously not a mobile quarterback at that time. How old was, and Matt Ryan was only 36, 37 at that time.
36.
And, he'd never been a mobile guy anyway. So, yeah, it does kind of make you wonder. You get an even older guy now in Aaron Rodgers, and look, at the time that he had Matt Ryan, a very established, smart guy that had seen a lot in his NFL career, and the best they could do was 7-10 in that division, which hasn't been regarded as a strong division in several years now. Even with Tampa Bay doing what they did and all.
And I asked the ego question, not to be super combative or just give the general, very obvious, how is it going to work between OC and quarterback? I wrote about it this morning. That's a very important relationship. I wrote about reasons for optimism, just kind of giving some different approaches. And I just asked that because Pittsburgh's had different types of OCs over the years. Todd Haley, very clearly, big-time ego, very much my way, highway type of personality. I think about a Randy Fichtner, which was the opposite. No ego really at all to Randy, and maybe that almost did the team a disservice in some way where just we kind of let Ben do his thing, but I thought you could credit Fichtner for really kind of letting his guys be themselves and make plays to the best of their abilities. Matt Canada, probably an ego. I was kind of wondering where Arthur Smith maybe fell in that equation to you. I don't think he's arrogant. I think the relationship can certainly work. You hear about people who have worked with Arthur Smith. They've said good things, how hard of a worker he is, how he doesn't have to work hard being the son of a billionaire and he goes in there and he's grinding and working. So I generally like Arthur Smith, but that relationship between Rodgers and Smith will be critical, obviously.
And look, one of the key components with an offense and a quarterback, in any given game is to come out with a script, try to see how defenses will react to certain things, and then how quickly you can adjust off of what opposing teams are able to do. And I would imagine that, they both have the Surface tablets out after the first 15, 20 plays and all. How quickly can they adapt? He came out and said, look, we didn't go out to get Aaron Rodgers and DK Metcalf to run the wishbone and all like that. Yeah, I get it. But, at the core of this thing, I think everybody has accepted that this team has to run the football better, first and foremost, with more success than they obviously had in the last couple of years to be able to set up some of these things in the passing game here. But how quickly in games can Aaron Rodgers and Arthur Smith say, okay, look, this is what they're doing to us. This is what we need to do. If maybe we need to start coming out throwing a lot more on early downs because of what they're doing and what we expect to see in certain personnel groupings along those lines there. Will we see more 11 personnel, earlier in game, just from the these two have got to be on the same page with each other right from the get-go, based on what they're seeing early in games to make sure they're adapting and not waiting to make some of those changes until third quarter down one full score, two scores, or something like that. And that goes, obviously, that's the big component with every offense and quarterback, it really in the game of football. How quickly can you adapt to what defenses are doing against you, coming out of the first 20 plays.
Arthur Smith made that "we're not going to run the wishbone" quip last year too, in a separate commentary long before Aaron Rodgers. So either Arthur Smith hates the wishbone or he secretly loves the wishbone, and it's a "he doth protest too much" situation there. I kind of found that comment pretty funny, but I think the offense will still structurally be the same. It has really been the same in a constant throughout Arthur Smith's career: multi-tight end, run heavy, top 5 in rushing attempts in all but one season in which Arthur Smith has been an offensive coordinator or a head coach down in Atlanta. Pittsburgh 4th in rushing attempts last year. Maybe that number is a little bit lower because you won't have the quarterback run element of Justin Fields having the 50 some odd attempts last year and some of the scrambles and rushes that Russell Wilson had that technically get counted in the run game category. But Aaron Rodgers had the second highest pass attempts last year, and you can't have that again and expect to win in 2025. Now, that's obviously in part because they played from behind. They were a 5-win team. If you look at some of the early down play calling with the Jets last year, it was a pretty tight 50-50 run-pass split. Pittsburgh tilted more run-heavy in that situation, too. But obviously, you can't have Rodgers throwing I think 584 pass attempts he had a year ago. So I think Smith will still keep that structure in place of run-heavy, multi-tight end. That's still going to be the philosophy. You made a really good point that we talked about a lot during the year. Pittsburgh getting off to those just habitually slow starts. And this has happened long before Arthur Smith. This was occurring, but 0 opening drive touchdowns last year. Can that change this year? It needs to change in 2025, Dave.
I mean, even look at what they've done in the first 2 offensive possessions per se.
I should pull that up. That's a good question. There was also a tweet from Warren Sharp over the weekend. I just happened to see it in passing that I think was something to the effect of yards gained on opening drives. And Pittsburgh was not last, but they were certainly close to the bottom in that category.
Right. I mean, okay. I mean, obviously, you're not going to come out every game and march the football 75 yards down the field for a touchdown. But within your first 2 drives per se, can we start seeing a dramatic increase in that? I mean, let's go through the games real quick from even last year of how many times this team scored an offensive touchdown within their first 2 offensive possessions.
I'm seeing 5 times last year if I'm putting the data in correctly.
Okay, so combine the first and second drives?
Yes, the first 2 drives. Which they all had to have come on the second drive because they didn't score a touchdown on the first drive last year.
All right. So only in 5 games did they have at least one offensive or only one offensive touchdown in their first 2 offensive possessions.
Correct. That was tied with a handful of teams, including the Eagles, surprisingly enough. The only teams that were worse than Pittsburgh were the Giants, Rams, and Bears. The Lions led the NFL with 15 touchdowns in those scenarios. The Bucks and Bills had 13. The Ravens had 12, as did the Bengals.
How many did the Jets have in first 2 drives last year?
8.
Well, that's better than 5.
It is. So that'll be a crucial element. And as you said,
you got to start jumping on teams. You just can't sit back and let Chris Boswell kick 5, 6 field goals a game. You get in the end zone once and expect to win games,
Yeah, Pittsburgh had 14 scoring drives on those opening 2 possessions last year, but only 5 of them resulted in touchdowns. So you had a real big, heavy slant towards kicking, which is one reason why Chris Boswell kicked the second highest number of field goals made in an NFL season last year with 40 something. So got to change that number for sure.
And I think overall, too, going back to season stats, let's see, last season for the Steelers, and what was the points scored? They had 48 points scored versus they were outscored last season in the first quarter 112-48.
That's horrible. That is digging a hole, playing from behind for a run heavy operation, and that just can't be.
And then, although the second quarter was their best quarter last season, they were still giving up some things on the giving up points on the other side that it didn't help offset that enough. It was 121 second quarter points to 84 last year. Now they were a much better third quarter team, 100 points in the third quarter versus 32 for the opponent, but then in the fourth quarter they were outscored.
And you're right, you can't wait until the third, fourth quarter to start making those adjustments. And it seems like Pittsburgh was making those adjustments before halftime, but even then you're almost, for lack of a better word, wasting a quarter of the game feeling it out and then adjusting. That's 25% of the game that you are just giving the opponent. And if you're doing that in such a competitive NFL and a really competitive AFC North, AFC at large for a Steelers roster that is not overwhelmingly talented, that's safe to say. You're not putting yourself in positions to win when you're giving away the first quarter like that.
Right. So can this offense? I think one of the big overarching things here with Rodgers and Smith is, can they start faster? Can we see more first quarter points?
What are the odds that in 2026, Aaron Rodgers and Arthur Smith are in their same roles in Pittsburgh? What does that scenario look like? I mean, I know the odds aren't high, so that's probably a bad question to ask. The better question probably is, how does that occur?
It starts with getting in the playoffs and getting not only a playoff win, but more than one playoff win. I think if this team can get past that first round of the playoffs, and then even past the second round, and with Aaron Rodgers noticeably playing a part in that, that's what it would look like for one last ride with Aaron Rodgers.
So if they win,
26.
if they break the streak and they win in the wild card round and then drop the divisional game, and let's assume that Rodgers played well that year, had a helping hand in the efforts, wants to come back, do you think Pittsburgh would bring him back if they only get the one playoff win, not the two?
I think it depends on what that looks like. Did your defense, did your offense score 40 and then still lost?
Well, I mean, assuming overall he played well during the season. I don't know I can't give you the hypothetical on how the divisional loss went, but he played well. He was an asset, not a liability to the season. I'm not saying he had an MVP season, but he had a good year that helped Pittsburgh win.
I'll just say this: it's plausible that we could be looking, at a second season with Aaron Rodgers. It's at least plausible.
I think so too. If you can deliver a playoff win, the one thing Pittsburgh has not gotten in years, how do you turn that guy away? And if he wants to come back and if his body feels good, and he's not going to play for a ton of money, I think he's proven that to his credit. He's not doing this to maximize his wallet at this point. Dude's made almost $400 million in his career. His wallet's doing just fine. I could see that scenario in which he comes back, but does Arthur Smith come back? Because if the Steelers do play well, if the offense does improve, if Aaron Rodgers does, for a moment at least, turn back the clock, will teams around the league look at Arthur Smith for head coaching jobs? He got 2 looks this year. He could have gotten the Jets job had it not gone to Aaron Glenn. There's a good chance that Smith was the runner-up to that one, as he was to Robert Saleh a couple years ago. If Smith shows he can turn Aaron Rodgers from a 5-win Jets team into a playoff winner, he'll get more calls.
Yeah, but I think it would take a lot for Arthur Smith to get another run as a head coach. So, I envision if Aaron Rodgers is back in 2026 with the Steelers, that Arthur Smith's with him as well.
I'm less certain that he would be, and I asked that question intentionally because obviously, if Rodgers plays poorly, then he almost certainly won't be back. Smith will be back though, but if Rodgers plays well, then that's going to draw more attention to Smith as head coaching candidate. And for a guy, he got 2 looks at a job despite collapsing at the end of 2024. What if he surges and the team soars in 2025? Would he not get more looks to become a head coach somewhere?
Well, I mean, I think it goes more than just play calling and offensive command. Can he run a team? You know.
Yeah, but he had interest this past offseason, which on its face was a little surprising considering how bad the year ended. Why would anyone want to go hire Arthur Smith to become your head coach based off how Pittsburgh finished?
Yeah, but I mean, how many years in a row did Omar Khan get interviews as general manager? You know, guys like that are going to get the interviews. There's only so many jobs in an off season.
Sure.
You know, I my immediate thoughts is what I just said. I think if Aaron Rodgers comes back, that Arthur Smith will be the OC.
Okay. Fair enough. Fair enough. I mean, obviously, he's under contract through 2026. I know I kind of got us away from going position group by position group, who got better and worse. We're finding some rabbit holes to go down early. Let's just kind of run through the rest of the offense here. Running back to that position group, new faces there. Kenneth Gainwell, Caleb Johnson, Jalen Warren returns. Is that group better or worse than a year ago?
Oh, at its I mean, we'll see how it plays out, obviously, at tight end and the other positions here. If you deem it, I deem it slightly better as we sit here at this point in the offseason. I think the biggest thing overall here is we're in the same position where we were with the wide receiver position per se of okay, you got a number one who's going to be your true number two. Now within that, Calvin Austin obviously had a better played well overall last season and kind of had a coming out. You didn't get to see anything of Roman Wilson, and you're obviously hoping to get something out of him. I'm a big fan of Caleb Johnson and how I think that they're going to use that backfield combination of Warren and Johnson. You like to think that the offensive line, at least, on will be better, assuming everybody stays healthy in that. So I will say that just top to bottom from a year ago per se, of looking at the offense and personnel, I think there's just slightly better.
I'll say they're better, a little more confidently. I think they're better to have Caleb Johnson, who I think fits Arthur Smith's system and philosophy more ideally than Najee Harris did. Kenneth Gainwell, I think, can have a valuable niche role, and Jalen Warren healthier will be important too. But even before last year started, another year older, another year wiser. He's talking about changing up his training routine. We'll see how much that pays off or not. But I think the group is better, not substantially better, but
All
I
right.
would say confidently better. To give my answer briefly, going back to quarterback, I should answer it too. Is the group better or not? I'm really on the fence. I will answer it with a very upward inflection. Better? I'll give it that kind of an answer right now, but obviously a whole lot to be determined there. So we're on the same page at running back. Let's go to tight end. You mentioned tight end earlier. It's the same at the top with Freiermuth and Washington. Some uncertainty behind. No Michael Pruitt anymore. Darnell Parham out for the season. Connor Hayward. You have some of the undrafted guys and JJ Galbraith. That group better, worse, the same?
That's obviously another position group you're interested to see play out throughout the summer here. I don't think Connor Hayward, other than special teams, gives you a lot to work with, especially on a down to down basis if he's part of the offense. I think Freiermuth, can have potential, like we said, one of his better seasons this year with Aaron Rodgers. I think you can stand to get a little bit more. I want to see a more well-rounded game out of Darnell Washington, not only in the blocking department, but even if you use him more in the passing game, how much more are you going to use him? I wasn't a big uh uh when it came to who was the third tight
Michael
experienced.
Pruitt.
Yeah, I wasn't a huge Pruitt guy last year overall, and obviously he ended up missing some games. Can you upgrade that with one of these undrafted guys, maybe like a Galbraith, to help that running game more when you do use two, and even Donald Parham before he went down injured. I didn't view that as a huge needle mover overall. Unfortunately, now we'll never know with him being out for the season. Um, I think it all comes down to what is that number 3 and number 4, because I expect them to carry 4, whether it be fullback slash tight end or whatnot. I think it depends on how those bottom 2 positions fill out behind obviously Freiermuth and Washington.
And there is also undrafted rookie free agent DJ Thomas Jones, who may play that fullback, tight end hybrid. That's what he was at South Alabama. Probably will assume more of the fullback role in Pittsburgh in training camp. I think the group largely is going to be the same, in part because the names are the same. Freiermuth, Washington, Hayward maybe is a number 3. There is still going to be some competition for him. Parham being out is going to increase those odds of Hayward sticking. His special teams value is going to be an asset as well. I think Galbraith is more practice squad material, a guy I like a lot, but practice squad material more likely than making the roster out of the gate. So he may get natural progression with Darnell Washington in year 3. Maybe Pat Freiermuth can add something else to his game. The quarterback play may elevate those guys in general too, but I think largely the same on that position group.
Look, I think one of the biggest questions offensive side of football when it comes to this team at this point of the offseason right now is there another quote unquote playmaker coming at either wide receiver or tight end or both? And what does that look like? I'm if they stand pat with this thing once again with the way the roster is now, are we going to get back to trade deadlines coming up? Can they find somebody to go get? And even if they go get that person like they did Mike Williams, can they get them integrated to make a difference in the second half of the season?
Sure.
Ideally, you'd like that guy to be part of this thing, you know, before the season starts. So I think that's the biggest question of this offense right now and personnel, the way it's shaping up is there going to be that one extra piece coming? And if so, who is that piece and how big of a needle mover can it be?
And when does that take place? Before week 1, before the deadline? Those types of questions are also important. Let's go to receiver now. What a sticky situation there. Out George Pickens, in DK Metcalf. That receiver room in totality, better, worse, the same than a year ago.
Look, I mean, you swap DK Metcalf for Pickens. I think top to bottom, that move alone gives you a slight increase just because of the addition by subtraction and sort of the negativity that George Pickens had within that receiving room. Now, look, I know Metcalf isn't choir boy either, but he has done it and seen more than a George Pickens has to this point.
And he won't be late. That's not right. That's not the
No,
concern with Metcalf. He's a
no,
bit of a hothead on the field, but that's fine.
right.
He's not bringing the baggage that Pickens is.
And is Robert Woods better than Van Jefferson slash Allen Robinson? Not 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 an extreme level, but I do view it as a little better at least. And you've got another year of Calvin Austin, and once again, even though I don't view Calvin Austin as a bona fide, I think he's got a ways to go to show that he's a bona fide, respected number two in the NFL. He certainly did take the steps in that direction last season, and then you know, uh, you can be as optimistic as you want when it comes to a Roman Wilson right now, but I mean we've got a lot to learn about Roman Wilson and the impact that he can make, within this offense, especially maybe second half of the season on there. So uh, I'll just put it to you this way: I think it's slightly better unit at this same time last year, but it's not it's not, oh, that's going to make a difference in 2 or 3 games type of better at this stage.
I agree, it's better, but still with a noticeable hole in this group. Metcalf's better than Pickens, 1-to-1. That's an advantage there. Austin, a better player than he was entering a year ago, having that, what I'll still call a breakout season. I assume you'll get something out of Roman Wilson this year, just him being a year in the league, having those mental reps at the least, even though he lacks really any and all game experience, will hopefully make him a little bit better. Robert Woods, to me, is a different shade of gray compared to Van Jefferson. It's like when you go paint swatches, there's baby blue and some other trumped up marketing blue word, and it all looks the same. You can call it differently, and they're functionally the same thing overall. So I'll say it got better marginally, but not a big increase, not a big jump.
Let's go back to scoring in the first quarter again. Can this team flip the script, so to speak, where instead of, let's say, I mean, you're talking about a huge difference once again. I mean, it was more than double, but what if you even got it to where it was outscoring your opponent in the first quarter? I don't want to say 2-1, but at least getting close to that 2-1, where you're the team that's got 100 points versus, let's say, 60 for the defense or for the opposition in the first quarter. How much of a difference would that make in 2025 for this team, instead of it being 48 to 112, and then the second quarter you almost had to have the 121 to 84 you had just to be competitive.
And Pittsburgh was great in the third quarter. I think they allowed 1 or 2 third quarter touchdowns all year, and that didn't come until late in the season. Yeah, you'd be much, much better. Not only just obviously on its face to get off the faster starts, but maybe take teams out of their game plans early. Allow yourself to commit to the run throughout. Allow your pass rush to be stronger if you're playing with leads going into the third, fourth quarters. So yeah, I mean, even at this point, Dave, to kind of steal the golf term we opened up with, be par in the first quarter, be even in the first quarter, scoring wise. We're not just getting outscored 2-1, 3-1. That would also make a change.
Yeah, I mean, keep the offense on the field longer too. What was the time of possession for the offense by quarter last season for this team?
Well, I can say over the first 2 drives, they possessed the ball for 3 minutes and 13 seconds on average. That was about bottom 10 in the NFL.
All right. And what impact does that have over a game to not have the defense out there for those amount of snaps and keeping guys like Hayward and Watt, some of those guys, fresher?
Well, if you think about the start of last year, the defense was on the field for very little. I think after the first 3-4 weeks, I had a stat that Pittsburgh had played defensively about 60, 70 fewer snaps through the first month than they did the year before. So they played 1 less game functionally over that span, 2023 compared to 2024. And the defense was elite to start the year. Then obviously everything waned down the stretch. So yeah, it makes a big difference.
All right.
All right. So offensive line. This is an interesting one, Dave. Better, worse, the same?
I mean, obviously, a lot of it's going to stem from your 2 tackles overall. But I mean, like we said, if this team has done what they thought that they did in these past several drafts, they're definitely expecting this unit to be better than last season. So, who's playing where at this time. even though he didn't play a lot in his rookie season. You got to see a couple of things out of Tanu. Roderick Jones going back over to the left side and hopefully being a lot more comfortable over there. I thought interior-wise, Zach Frazier, without a doubt, should be regarded as one of the top centers in the league. Sayamalo obviously had that injury early on in the season. I didn't think he was awful throughout the season, but I'd like to think that 100% health will at least play into some positivity for him. And then Mason McCormick had his bumps and bruises, but some good things within that. I think I think you have to big picture look at this as being at least optimistic that this offensive line will come out of the chute being a better unit top to bottom than they were a year ago.
I agree. The potential's there. The potential's there for this unit to be a top 10 unit in the NFL. Now they have to show it and prove it, and they have a long ways to go to get to that point. I wonder if we ranked every offensive line, or when the outlets that PFF and the like rank the Steelers' offensive line, where they slot in at right now. I don't know where that would be. Probably not top half of the NFL if I had to guess as of right now, but there's a lot of room to grow to make a big leap if everyone plays to their potential. The concern I have, though, compared to a year ago, where you sit there and say this is worse, is the depth of the offensive line. The depth is a whole lot worse than a season ago, and if Pittsburgh encounters the injuries in 2025 they encountered in 2024, losing a starting tackle for the entire season, losing a starting right guard for the majority of the season going down in week 4, losing their left guard about a week or two before the year begins for the first month of the season, losing their center for 2 games. Pittsburgh does not have the depth to handle that the way they handled that a year ago, which they didn't handle it great a year ago, but they got through it. They had enough guys there that they could, plug in. They do not have that this year.
How functionable
Is that a word?
is Spencer Anderson for a couple of games at either guard spot?
Not very.
Can you get by with him?
Not very. They tried that last year because he was the initial next man up when Sayamalu went down. And by week 3, I think week 4, they were turning to McCormick, which made it very clear they were not liking what they were getting out of Spencer Anderson. He's versatile, and he's also a young guy. Maybe there's improvement there, but, get through a game, sure. Get through a stretch of games, no.
And do you really want to see people say, well, you guys didn't give, I've seen a couple of comments saying you guys didn't give Ryan McCollum enough respect for some of the time that he filled in. Look, right. I don't want to see any games without Zach Frazier at center. I'll tell you that.
I mean, McCollum's the guy I'm most comfortable with right now. I thought if you need him for a game or two as he was needed last year when Frazier rolled his ankle against the Raiders, okay, I'm okay with that. That's on my list of concerns depth-wise. That is the lowest bar. That is the lowest mark. The area I'm least concerned about. It's guard, and it's especially offensive tackle depth.
Right. I mean, because right now you got Calvin Anderson as that guy right now.
Right. And they have not added anybody else veteran-wise to date. Could that change? UFL's wrapping up. They just had their championship game yesterday or over the weekend some point. They add somebody in camp, cut downs. We'll see, but it is really shaky.
All right. So overall, across the board, this has got to be, and I haven't looked at all the offensive lines around the NFL, but when it comes to depth overall, it's on the grit your teeth factor element. It's up there.
It is. So overall, are they better or worse? I think starter-wise, they could be better. Depth-wise, they're definitely worse.
Well, they're about the same depth-wise, right?
Compared to a year ago, I wouldn't say they're about the same where they were a season ago. They had much better depth last year.
Because you had Calvin Anderson there, right? You had Spencer Anderson there.
Well, I'm saying like the start of last year where you had a 3-man tackle group of Moore and Jones and Fautanu. You had McCormick, who came into the year as a backup. Even Frazier at the start of training camp was a backup because you lost Nate Herbig early in training camp. Just across the board in that sense, you had guys that plugged in. Who's plugging in for an entire season if one of your tackles goes down with a dislocated kneecap before week 3.
Yeah, I mean, well, what was the situation with that last year?
It was Broderick Jones kept that role essentially, and
Right.
obviously he struggled pretty severely. But I'll take Broderick Jones over Calvin Anderson.
Yeah, but the whole onus was you thought that your top 2 last year was probably gonna be, well, I mean, you did have Dan Moore,
Right.
to
Moore
deal with.
had that spot locked up. It was Jones and Fautanu and how they were going to handle that kind of became the question. Then it became moot once
Well,
Fautanu went down.
what weren't you going into the season, at least before, last year, thinking that, at some point Moore was gonna get overtaken?
I really didn't know how it would go. But even if he did, then you have Dan Moore as your backup off the bench, which is incredible, had that been the case.
Okay, I see where you're coming from.
Yeah, so I think the depth is just a whole lot much thinner this year. So I don't know how to couch it. Is it better if the group stays healthy? Then yeah, probably. If not, if they have the injuries of a year ago, then it's going to look a whole lot worse.
Well, look,
With a 41-year-old Aaron Rodgers.
well, here's the thing. The expectation at the start of the year will probably overshadow where the ranking is. In other words, they're going to have to prove it. Okay, and if this team does not have a top 10, regardless of its PFF, me, you, any outsider, Warren Sharp, whatever, the consensus has across the board has got to be, oh yeah, this is a top 10 offensive line.
I think so, or just about. And we've been saying that for a couple of years now. The offensive line has potential. They could do it this year. It hasn't happened. So this has to be the year. No excuse, no explanation. It's pass fail.
And then look, once again, we've hit on this too. I mean, it's a big year for Broderick Jones because you got to make that decision next offseason. Is this going to be our guy, or do we have to go back to the draft once again and spend a top 3 draft pick to kind of go that route again? You potentially going to have to. You will see what. In all likelihood, this is Isaac Seumalo's last season, right?
Right. And who's the replacement for him? I don't see him on the roster right now.
Not at this given time, no. So you could potentially have to go back into a draft next year within the first 4 picks of this draft to go get another starting guard and another starting tackle.
And that's supposed to be the year of the quarterback.
Right. And that, with the way you drafted, I would think long term, you're thinking, well, at least 2026, maybe we'll have to take a guard, which is okay.
Mm-hmm.
I'd much rather guard be a higher need than a tackle.
Sure.
But what if it's both?
Right. If it's both, then you're in big trouble. And yeah, you could sit there and say, well, go sign somebody in free agency. And maybe, but the O-line tax is expensive. The guard market is super hot. And of course, paying a tackle is even hotter. Dan Moore got paid $80 million. I like Dan Moore. I'm rooting for Dan Moore. Dan Moore's not worth $80 million. And so those teams often tend to regret those big offensive line deals in free agency because players just get overvalued, overpaid because the market is so scarce.
All right, top to bottom. We spent all this time, an hour talking about pretty much the offense as a whole. Is it slightly better for this same time last year? The same? Or slightly worse, or even considerably worse?
Well, I don't think either of us called any position group worse of all the ones we went through.
Right.
Quarterback, running back, offensive line, receiver. We all said either the same. I say we all as if there's 10 people in the chat right now. The 2 of us said better or the same. So I think the answer has to almost be better, but how much better is that better?
Right. We're not in a significantly better camp.
And there's no guarantee. Our bettors were pretty hesitant on quarterback. Receiver, we had some caveats for that. Offensive line, I gave my concerns there. The only group I could sit there... Okay, of the groups, what group are you most confident in saying it got better? Where if you had a crystal ball for the end of 2025, you would feel the most likely group that truly got better was which, offensively?
I would say running back.
Me too. I would say running back too was the answer. I was most confident in saying this group got better. Everything else, I have some questions. What is second on that list behind running back?
I would say quarterback.
I will say wide receiver.
Okay.
And then
What
give
what
me
what was the most significant move in the offseason that this team made? Was it trading for DK Metcalf or was it signing Aaron Rodgers?
trading for DK Metcalf. The shock of it, the unprecedented nature of it, the contract, and it's also a more talented player. It's also a long-term play. Rodgers could be one and done, and by this time next year, it just becomes a footnote in the chapter of the 2020s for Pittsburgh. It's kind of the most likely course. Metcalf is a Minka Fitzpatrick. He's here for the short term and the long-term gain.
Okay.
Would you agree, or do you think it's Rodgers
Yeah, I mean,
because it's quarterback?
but if you just limit it down to just 2025 though, what's the more significant one?
In terms of what will dictate the team's success, or how do you define significant?
I just what stands to make the bigger impact and to potentially make this team better? The addition of Aaron Rodgers or the addition of DK Metcalf?
I mean,
You can't look at the DK Metcalf without looking at obviously the subtraction of George Pickens, uh,
yeah, but I mean they're
but
independent. Now
as
it's
it right as it sits right now, which 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 is going to be more impactful?
I mean, quarterback is quarterback. Quarterback is always dictating you. So from that narrow standpoint, then I would say quarterback and Aaron
Right,
Rodgers.
that's where I'm at.
Okay. All right, fair enough. We'll save the defense better or worse. Maybe we'll do that Wednesday to give us something to talk about then. We kind of ran through a good hour on the offense here. Anything else to talk about, Dave? Let me ask you just quickly. We discussed a lot about TJ Watt, his contract situation. Things will be pretty quiet, we'll imagine, throughout these next couple of weeks. What do you think the public perception of TJ Watt will be? I think in 2021, everyone understood his situation. I think more people were in his camp than the team's camp. Of course, when the deal got done, you had the Adam Schefter tweet, which may have exaggerated things a little bit. Watt seemed to say as much after the fact, but Watt bursts into Art Rooney's office and says, "I'm tired of this. Let's get the deal done. I'm going to work out." It was his whole Pittsburgh grit, tough, Steel City mantra. Will he get that same favorable welcome this time around, or will people be against him more than 2021? As often is the case where players say, "Yeah, you guys are all overpaid. Don't complain about 35 million. Just take the deal."
His actions, all of his actions and all aside of wanting to get that done, he still came out of it as the highest paid non-quarterback in the NFL, right?
In 21, right, absolutely. And everyone, I think, was in his corner. I think fans were very happy, and nobody was gritting their teeth saying, TJ Watt's being a baby holding out. I think every fan was basically like, go pay the man.
I think majority wise this time around, when this deal gets done, is that and I don't know how lopsided it'll be, but I think the majority of Joe Blow Steeler fans will say they overpaid for him.
I think so too. I think that'll be the general consensus. You won't have that warm and fuzzy feeling. Will it be as strong negatively as Cam Hayward a year ago? Because when Hayward got paid, everyone was like, oh my God, what are the Steelers doing? Even though the guaranteed money won't be the same in the Hayward contract as the Watt contract, but will it be that kind of negative feeling?
Well, a lot of people don't pay as much attention to what really happened with the Cam Hayward.
Sure. I'm not talking reality. I'm just talking the perception, the feeling from the fan base.
I think it'll be about the same. They shouldn't have done it.
Okay. I think so too. Now, what do you think the reaction will be, assuming this thing drags on into training camp? There is no deal done. Let's assume TJ Watt attends but is holding in and is only doing work on the side, a la 2021. Will he feel the blowback of that from the fan base?
Oh yeah, you'll hear. Well, I can't go to my job and just sit around and do nothing. Just show up. Okay. The yeah, he'll feel the pushback for sure.
Okay. Okay. I agree. But I think it's different than 2021. I don't recall him getting that pushback back then. I think people were understanding of his situation and why he was not participating.
Right. Now I understand the money aspect of it and why it could, should, and will get done a lot more so than Joe Blow, fan does. And that's why I think that he's you pay your good players, and the Steelers have money to pay, and they don't have anybody else to pay, and that's their own fault on top of it. And he's a good guy. I think a good player still. I think he's still got a couple of good years left in him, and I think the right move is to make him the highest paid non-quarterback in the league at this point. And a lot of people disagree with me on that. And if he comes out and gets hurt, and if he signs this big contract, goes out and has another 10, 11 sack season and misses games because of injury and all like that, people are going to say, see, I told you. But I mean, I just think of you know, the way this roster is built, the philosophy of this organization, where they sit from a financial standpoint. The obvious answer is to get it done and get it behind him. And I'll be shocked if he doesn't come out of this as, once again, as the highest paid non-quarterback in the NFL.
Now, I'm not saying the situations are identical as 2021. Watt is older. He's in his 30s. He's coming off one of the worst seasons of his career in a non-injured season. 11.5 sacks, 0 sacks over his last 4 games, including the postseason for the first time of his career. So the situations are different. But my focus is just to ask the question of the perception. And I do think he'll have a lot, edgier perception, a lot, people bristling at him a whole lot more this time than last time.
I don't disagree with that.
All right, fair enough. All right, Dave, anything else to talk about? Feel free. If not, we can get to some reader emails and close out today's show.
All right, don't have much here. Let's see. Mike Shorter here says, what are 3 things the Steelers must do before week 1? And I assume TJ will be re-signed. In order of importance, he has number 1, get quality tackle guard depth. Number 2, find a good backup tight end. Number 3, establish a starting slot cornerback. So what are 3 things? Those, I guess, are what it would be his 3 things. So what are kind of the 3 things that we both think the Steelers must do before week 1, and assuming that TJ Watt will be re-signed?
I think adding offensive line depth, as the reader said, number 1. It's difficult to do, but needs to be done in some form or fashion. Adding an offensive weapon of some sort would be ideal, be it ideally a receiver, but maybe a tight end, depending on what the options are and what things look like. A Johnny Smith, Kyle Pitts, things we've talked about before.
Would you put that above the tackle or guard depth, or 1A, 1B, or what when it comes to those 2 things? Because both of them are important. I agree in my eyes, of getting either tackle and guard depth, at least one of the 2, if not 2 of the 2. But I mean, what are the odds that they add? What are the odds that we're talking about guys that are not under contract right now at both the tackle and guard position, both positions ending up on the 53-man roster? In other words, does it feel like it's likely to be one of those 2 positions and not both?
Yeah, I mean, it's probably safe to say one gets added, not both, because it's just hard to find offensive line talent, and adding 2, it can be challenging. I'll put it this way. I mean, to answer your question, what's more important? They're both important. We can walk and chew gum at the same time, but also offensive line is more important, even more so than adding a receiver. You got to build this thing out. Pittsburgh has focused a lot on trenches, which is why it's disappointing. Their depth this year on the offensive line is really poor. So it's like oxygen. Like, offensive line depth is oxygen. You don't think about it until you don't have it, and then you start suffocating. So I think offensive line depth, I would try to make an aggressive move to add depth, even more so than making an aggressive move to add a playmaker. I know that probably sounds counterintuitive, and many would disagree, and it's hard to get offensive line depth, no question about that, but Pittsburgh has to put some better resources into building up their offensive line depth.
Sure. I mean, without a doubt, I would have those 2, 1A, 1B.
What's 1A, what's 1B in your mind?
I can see the path that you're taking, but it is dependent on. I mean, you're assuming that one of those 5. I'm trying to look at it more glass half full, that they'll stay healthy up front with the 5 that they have.
But how do you look at that glass? I mean, you're just hoping and praying at
Sure.
that point. At least for the weapons, you could sit there and say that, hey, Calvin Austin took a step. Maybe he takes another step. When Wilson maybe becomes a 3rd-round pick, we envision. At least there's some guys to talk about there. At offensive line depth, there's really no guys to talk about that you can hang your hat on and say maybe this guy develops and becomes something.
I would still probably go 1A with wanting another offensive weapon slightly above the tackle and guard depth. But
Okay,
once again,
that's fair.
I think, without a doubt, I think those are 1A and 1B.
What's
How important
3C,
is,
how we're doing this?
he's got established a starting slot cornerback as his number 3. How
I mean,
important is that?
It's important, and Pittsburgh has always had this issue post Mike Hilton of finding that guy to confidently lean on as the guy. They've either had rotations or just Beanie last year. Hey, you're here, Beanie. You're healthy. Have at it until Cam Sutton returns. But I mean, how do you do that to establish it? Do you do anything differently other than just go through camp? I don't know if there's really an approach you take. I don't know if
Right.
you add anybody at this point, or just kind of letting the reps play out and watching Bishop grow. So I don't know if you're really actively doing anything in that over that couple of weeks. I'm not sure what that third thing would be. What do you think that third thing would be, Dave?
Just ensuring you've got the right people up front on a defensive line, I think, and hoping that Derek Harmon is able to come in. But once again, it's not like you're not moving the chairs around, so to speak. I think it's more of a hope. Did you make the right decisions in Wyatt Black and Derek Harmon? Because I do have kind of my questions, at least at the early part of the season, of how much better this run defense will be initially coming out.
Yeah. I mean, I think the third thing to do, and you're already going to be doing it along the way, but just getting this offense on the same page, getting quarterback and OC and receivers on the same page, and understanding of what expectations are and how our offense is going to look. And it's like cornerback, where you're not really, you're not visibly doing anything different, but that's going to be a really important part of the season, is just getting everyone on the same page for this quarterback that got here in June.
All right, so most of those things we listed as number 3 are things that are kind of, you're hoping happens organically, right?
Right. You're not making this, it's not going to be visible to the outside of, oh, look at them making this big change, but things that must just get done, boxes that must be checked during training camp to get you ready for September 7th against the Jets.
I guess the easy cop out here, what are the 3 things the Steelers must do before week 1? Stay healthy.
Right. And of course, sign Watt, and maybe a Boswell, cash advance, all that kind of stuff. But the question, I think, was already kind of built with assuming the contracts are taken care of and not a talking point.
All right. I think we got through the emails in there. Anything else coming in as we are 1 hour and 15 minutes into this?
Not that I can tell. I'll go through Twitter one last time. Joey Chestnut will be in the hot dog contest this year on July 4th. That'll be exciting. That's about it, though. So we'll be back tonight for our live stream. The next podcast will be on Wednesday.
All right. Sounds like a winner. We'll probably talk a lot about defense in the same manner that we talked about the offense as we get into these 5.5, 6 weeks. As Mike said, this is the longest 6 weeks. It's a tough stretch here at this point when it comes to covering the team. But we'll try to figure out ways to fill up the time on these podcasts. And Wednesday being the next one, as Alex said, joining us on the live stream. I'll have some interesting round of questions this time around on Monday night. So look for Alex's YouTube account, and we'll get started at 7 o'clock Eastern time tonight with that. So as always, you can follow me on Twitter/X at Steelers Depot. Follow Alex at Alex_Kozora. Follow the show at Terrible Podcast. Email the show, theterriblepodcast@gmail.com. If you like what we do and want to donate to the cause, SteelersDepot.com, hit the donate button. Also, if you like an ad-free version of the site, SteelersDepot.com, hit the ad-free button, follow the directions that way. So until Wednesday, as always, thanks for listening to the Terrible Podcast with Dave and Alex.